Hello, Mitchell. Thank you for a wonderful session. I think it was very useful, especially for people who are just about to get into the WordPress community and things like that.
Mhm.
And once again, thanks for taking time and then sharing your experience. Especially as you said, I think in one of your slides you had this word about what is the precedent. I mean, what is the we are living in the unprecedented time, right? And how many times
Yes.
you hear about it. I think that's one thing that's keep coming up in pretty much every conversation, and I think
Yes,
you have very clearly captured that in your slide. Uh,
absolutely. Well, thank you for having me. This has been a joy to be involved in WordCamp India this year.
yeah, and very sorry for waking up very early in the morning. I
That's
know
okay.
world is not flat, and unfortunately, because of the time zones, it becomes a
Time
bit.
zones, for sure.
Okay, so we have a couple of questions that we have got from your
Sure.
talk. I'm just going to go over each of those questions.
Hmm.
So this is the first question. So somebody asked, post COVID, how do you think meetups would evolve? I think this question stems from the fact that you talked about, how previously the physical events used to happen, and
Hmm.
now we have the online events. And I think maybe post COVID, hopefully within 6 months, maybe a year, 2 year, I don't know, what at what time, once all this
Hmm.
craziness ends, right? In your mind, especially with somebody who has been involved with a lot of these things, how do you think things would evolve?
Yeah, I think it's going to depend on the event and the coordinator. It's going to depend on a lot of factors, and there'll be a lot of moving pieces, so to speak. But I really do think that most of us, at least for me and what I plan for ours, is that when we do start meeting in person again, we would continue to also stream over Zoom and be able to incorporate people who can't physically be there, even locally, when sometimes people can't leave their children at home to be able to attend meetup. Now they're able to join us. And so even if it wasn't because of COVID, I think it's a great opportunity to involve more people and make meetups more accessible to people if you do a hybrid event where you do have people in the room, but you're also streaming over Zoom. And we have done that once or twice in the past. And it was trouble for me to get the knack of doing it. But now, of course, we're all pros at being able to put on live events and using Zoom for meetups. And so I really do hope that more coordinators, more meetup event coordinators will do that as well and continue to have hybrid events so that people can be involved no matter where they are.
Yeah, I think you basically coined the word hybrid events, right? I think that's how events would be going forward,
Mhm.
because I mean, even earlier, people have tried live streaming and things like that, but not everybody really liked it. But now, since you've been forced to do that, I think now people are actually able to see the benefit in it. And I think you probably hit the nail out of the head by saying that it become more accessible for people, right? It's not necessarily because of the geographical location, but it could also be because of other commitments, like the family commitments and other things people might have. For example, if you have to attend a word camp, then you have to probably spend the entire weekend or something like that, right?
Right.
Especially during especially when we used to have the physical events. But I think
Hmm.
it may not be possible for everybody, especially people with small kids. You
Right.
need to find somebody to look after the kid and things like that. I think
Hmm.
hybrid events, as you predicted, I hope that would be the future.
Me too. I think that, for, like I said, for accessibility, to be more inclusive and to allow people to attend events regardless of the ability to pay for an event, the ability to travel because of their home life and all of those things. And for some people, it's even dietary restrictions. They go to a conference and there's things that they just have to bring their own food because of their own dietary restrictions. If you can attend from your own home and that's your preference, then why not allow people to be involved that way?
Awesome. Okay, so moving on, this is the next question. So, do you think we would have more non-WordCamp WordPress events in the future, happening in the future? I think this is probably
Yeah.
question about when you talked about WP Fest and other things, right? I think it's
Yes.
coming up from there.
So we already have some of them, right? So WP Campus, for example, has been going on for several years, and now we have WordFest. That's part of um, the big orange heart, and that's, like, as I mentioned, the organization that I'm involved with, and it's specifically for remote workers. So even if we pivot that event to having an in-person component, we're committed to always having that event also reach people in remote community, remote workers, wherever they are in the world, because we are a global organization. I think that there's a possibility that we will continue to see other organizations kind of add to that. And whether they're specifically WordPress or they're tech events that include a WordPress component, I think that you will see other people and other organizations hold events, in-person hybrid events or online, again, to be able to do that. I think that we've kind of, I would be very sad if online events went away, regardless of whether they were WordCamps or other WordPress type events or technology events, because, as I said in my talk, I've made friendships all over the world. Even though I have difficulty with time zones, I have friends in India, and I have friends in Bangladesh and Pakistan and Croatia and Mexico and Newfoundland, and just so many places that it would be really sad to me if I didn't see them at naturally occurring events, and we didn't have to try to, oh yeah, I haven't talked to so-and-so in a while, I should reach out to them, as opposed to just organically seeing them at events. So my hope is that we see lots of events online continue, whether they are sanctioned WordCamps or they are not associated with WordPress officially, and our WordPress and technology events.
Awesome. Thanks for answering that. So
Sure.
I want to move on to the next question. Next question is like, so there are a lot of places where people can ask for help. Again, I think this is something that you mentioned in your slide, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it
Yep.
may be confusing for beginners.
Mm-hmm.
So what would you suggest for a beginner? I think the question
Yes.
is around, especially for beginners, like when you see so many options, right? It's either like when you have no option, that's also bad. But when you have too many options, it could also be bad, right? I think the question is from that.
Right. It becomes difficult to make a decision when there's so many ways that you can get help. And it's really hard for me to say that there's one good place for people to start, because it really depends on how you learn best. So if you are somebody who learns best from somebody live and in the moment, where you can sit down together, whether it's virtual or in person, then a class or meeting somebody at a meetup online, things like that, is a good place to start. If you're somebody that loves to learn from video content, then finding a creator like Morten Rand Hendrickson, who's on LinkedIn Learning, whether it's somebody who's built YouTube videos, whether it's going to wpbeginner.com and being able to search a lot of the articles that are there. So it really depends on how you learn best. And there are a lot of Facebook groups, as I said in my slide as well. And there's beginner, intermediate, advanced groups. There's groups specific to commerce. There's specific to WooCommerce. There's specific to all kinds of different specific products and categories of products. And yes, it can be very overwhelming. The other thing that I suggest is, if you are completely overwhelmed, ask somebody. Ask somebody, where is someplace that I can find really good content? So I'm not looking at a video that was created 10 years ago and isn't going to really work with the current version of WordPress, because I can't find those things in my dashboard because they don't exist anymore. It's all changed. So I always say my DMs are open. You can always message me on Twitter. If I don't know the answer, we will find somebody for you. And honestly, sometimes when I can't find an answer, I just tweet it. I just go to Twitter, I tweet it, I put hashtag WordPress, and people will respond and give me some advice. So there really are a lot of ways, but the most important thing is to find the way that you learn best, whether that's going to learn.wordpress.org, going to a Facebook group, approaching somebody in your meetup, etc. Find the way that you learn best, and then find a way that people are presenting content in that way. I hope I didn't say that too confusingly, but I think that's the best way to
what you said
proceed.
made perfect sense, especially about when you're too confused, it's always good to approach somebody who has probably gone through the same path that you're actually about to go through, right? I think that
Yes.
is the important thing there, and I think you have articulated it really well. And I also agree with you that, especially with Gutenberg, a lot of things are very fast changing, because earlier, when pre-Gutenberg days, like when you have a PHP function in WordPress core, mostly it's not going to be changing. And WordPress was also very particular about maintaining backward compatibility. So even if somebody recorded a video or had a code snippet, it's good to use that even after a couple of years. But
Yeah,
now, especially with Gutenberg, where things are moving at a really fast pace, like a video tutorial about Gutenberg may have become outdated after WordPress got updated, like one or two major releases. So I think
right.
what you have said is really good. And I think like the main taking away point from that is, like, if you're too confused, it's always good to approach somebody who would have gone down the path that you're trying to go. I think that's
And
really solid advice.
my advice also to people who are more experienced with WordPress is not to downplay anybody else's questions. So I have often seen people ask the most basic questions because they honestly don't know the answer. And somebody with more experience will say something in a rude way, like, "Oh, that's so easy," or "You're asking this in the wrong forum," instead of just being helpful. And so I remember when I first learned WordPress, there was no one button install yet. So it was, you had to download WordPress, upload WordPress, change your salt keys, change your WP config passwords and things like that. And I bought hosting and I bought a domain, but I didn't have the faintest clue how to get things from the domain onto the hosting. And I sat down with a friend who was just so advanced in WordPress, and he took the time to explain it to me so that I left there and I never had a question again about how to do that. And I'm forever grateful that he didn't say, "Oh, that's so easy, just look online and figure it out," because we need to always be helping the people who are new. You never know who the next person that you help into WordPress might be somebody who develops something truly amazing in WordPress later on, or builds a site that really helps people. And even if it doesn't, that you've helped somebody else, another human on this planet, in WordPress is always a good thing.
Yeah, I think I really agree with you, especially on the giving back part, right? So like you have gained knowledge from somebody. Now it's your time to pass it on to somebody else. I think that's
Yes,
how like the chain works. And yeah, that's really solid advice. Okay, so let's
absolutely.
move on to the next question.
Mhm.
Okay, so I think you probably touched upon this a bit. So the question is, like, do you think online meetups have helped people who are in rural areas, like people who are not living in the big cities, right?
Yes.
Or like in the happening place, or the in the tech happening place kind of thing.
Yeah,
What is your take on
absolutely.
that?
Absolutely. There are people in my own meetup. I live in a very small area. My city is Rochester, New York. And although it is a city, it's like the fourth smallest city in New York State. And people who attend our meetup sometimes travel almost an hour just to get to our meetup because it's the only one until you get. There's one in Buffalo, there's one in Rochester, and then all the way to New York City before there's other meetups in New York State. And so people will sometimes travel up to an hour to get there. Now they don't have to do that. So they are considered rural to us, and they have the ability to not have to leave work early, rush to get somewhere. They can choose which ones they attend easily. And now they also, like I said, if you are somebody who's a single mother, for example, there are lots of single parents in our group. They don't have to worry about finding a babysitter or having grandma come over to watch the children. They can just say, "Okay, go play. Mom's going to be on a meetup for a little while. And so I think regardless of why you are, physically where you are, or emotionally where you are, or just situationally, the fact that meetups are online have really made it open to so many more people.
Yeah, I think that's the really big takeaway. I think, like, just to add to that point, right, it also has given people access to people from experts from all over the world. For just the fact that you like sitting in New York giving us a talk in WordCamp India is a perfect example, right? So you are now
Yes.
able to share your expertise with us, which in a physical WordCamp maybe it would have been possible if you are okay to spend 30 hours on a flight, sitting traveling all the way from here to here. So I think it has benefited not just the speakers but also the attendees in that
Mhm.
case. And I
I mean,
think
I
that's
would love to be in India. Trust me, someday I hope to visit, but definitely for this year, that wasn't going to be a possibility.
All right. I think we are running out of time. So we also have a room where people can actually like continue asking more questions. And I think we'll be able to do that. Anyway, once again, thank you very much for taking time to do the session, and also like waking up very early and answering all the questions live for our audience. Thank
It's
you
my
very much.
pleasure. Thank you so much for having me.
Yep. Thank you.